December is the time of snow and, most importantly, Christmas. There's a couple of activities that I enjoy to put me into the festive mood. One of those being playing piano, and the other, of course, gift giving. This story begins when I was trying to come up with a gift for my friend. I couldn't come up with anything. Then I finally remembered that she had asked me for a duffel bag, so I sprang up out of my chair and ran around my room, looking for one just lying around. Quick and easy. Something I'm not going to use, give it to her, clear up everything. I'm kind of a clutterbug. But I couldn't find anything that I did not want to part with. So obviously, you gravitate towards the rainforest. But nothing on there seemed different enough, like my corduroy jumpsuit, or cheap enough for my interest. So that leaves one option. Make it. Welcome back to Beyond Every Norm. This story begins like most others. The drafting. The drafting of this project was quite difficult because I didn't have much to go off of except for that duffel bag that you saw in the intro. So it was filled with a lot of trial and error, as you will see. I wanted to make some basic pockets for the sides of it, which I'll explain how they go together later. It's kind of hard to do it just through words. Here I was trying to think about what pieces and how many of them I will need. Obviously you need 2 end caps and 2 of them need to be lining, and of course the zipper. The rectangle you see on the left is the body of the duffel bag, but just rolled out flat. Now I began on the dimensional drawings, which is just the shapes but with the measurements on them. I did not know how long the sides of this rectangle were going to be, but I knew they had to be as long as the circumference of the ends. So I just said that that was K inches long. It was just a placeholder. I did not know how long I wanted this duffel bag to be. The only reference I had was this duffel bag. So I measured the length of it and decided that I wanted it to be longer than that one. By how much? Make it 10 inches. And then of course you have to add the seam allowance. Then it was time to draft up the lining pieces. This right here is the pocket body and the pocket top. Now I needed to find out the circumference of the end pieces. So first I needed a diameter. Using the duffel bag that I already have, I found it to be 10 inches, but I thought that was just a bit too small, so I decided to make it 13. With some basic geometry, you know that pi times d, which d is the diameter, equals the circumference. With pi equaling roughly 3.14, we can just multiply 13 3 times and we get 39 point something. But after thinking about it, it actually equals 40 point something, so I just gave up on it and just decided to make it 40. With that piece of paper that I just wasted doing useless math, I decided to have some fun with it. Which turns out was the right thing, because look at what just happened. I ended up throwing it between my door and the wall. I wanted to do one final rough sketch, but the first attempt ended up looking like garbage. There was a lot of mistakes and restarts in this project. Fabric selection is one of the most important steps in any project, so anything free is good enough. The process of me grabbing some random material and then throwing it to the ground continued for a good 2 minutes.
It's like carpet. Let's do it.
Then it was time to look for a lining fabric. This also took forever. Then I eventually found one and checked to make sure that I had enough of it.
Perfect.
It took me 45 seconds to put the lid back on this box. Then it was time to make the 1-to-1 patterns. So, what I'm going to be laying out onto the fabric to cut out. I decided to use an old mixed media pack that I had from my art classes. You might see some of the older artwork in there. Here I am making a pattern for the ends. In hindsight, I should have found something to trace. All of the future problems and misjudgments were because of my inability to draw a perfect circle. I don't think I can describe how much it pains me to know this in hindsight, how easy of a solution I could have just had tracing something circular. Here I decided where the pocket was going to be. I just arbitrarily thought, oh, 3 inches looks good, and then I drew them. There was not too much thinking going on. Here I'm measuring the circumference of the pattern to make sure that it lines up approximately with the 40-inch measurement on the side of the rectangle. Now here I'm creating the 2 other pieces of the pattern, which are the top and the bottom lining of the pockets. This was the first misalignment of the pieces, and it's obvious that I can't draw a perfect circle, but you could see me equally as annoyed in the video. Now it was time to move on to the main body. The main body is pretty easy. It's just a rectangle with 2 sides of 40 inches and the other 2 of 31 inches. So I just needed to make a rectangle out of paper with those dimensions. My first round of measurements yielded that the sides were too short, so I had to add some extra meat to the sides, which is seen here. I began with cutting out the 7 by 4 inch square just to get that out of the way, and then I began with the rectangles on the side. Wait. Oh my god. I could have just put the measurements onto the fabric. Oh. Well, that was 30 minutes of my life lost. Now it was time to make a plan for the straps of the duffel bag. Now I gotta think about where the straps are gonna be. So that would be the zipper. This is more difficult than I thought. Wait. Oh yeah. So what must have been a stroke of genius came over me. I decided to make a three-dimensional diagram of where I want the straps to be. This next creation is a mystery tool that will help us later. This is called a bias tape maker. Take a wild guess what it makes. It's pretty easy to use. Just pull the fabric through the actual device and then iron it. Now we finally get to touch some actual material. First up is marking up and then cutting out the body. I was going to do a whole voiceover section about this, but you know what I'm doing. I'm placing the pattern onto the material, then I'm cutting it out. This blue is what was decided to be a good lining. I then marked the pockets on the actual body fabric and the lining fabric, and now we can move on. Sewing time. To create the pockets on the side, it requires the construction of one of the most common types of pockets seen in any form of sewing, a welt pocket. To start a welt pocket, you have to sew together the pocket lining and the pocket front. All you do is line up the two rectangles that you made on each of them and then sew on top of it. This was me piecing together the top and the bottom of the pocket backing, or mostly just the inside of the pocket. Then I did the top stitching of the two pieces just to make sure that they did not come apart during use. The reason why I keep on adjusting my hands is because I want to make sure that the seam on the bottom falls on the correct side while I'm sewing it. After sewing together the front and the lining, I just have to cut out that pocket in the middle of that rectangle. Just making sure to leave these triangles on the corners so there's no tension on the corners when I turn them inside out. You'll see that later. The future is now. This is what I meant by turning inside out. Now to make sure everything lines up and it looks all nice, time to iron. Of course, time to get back to sewing. Here I am top stitching the sides of the pocket just to make sure that it stays inside out. Here you can barely see it, which is kind of the point. Now it's time to install the pocket of the pocket. Before pinning this, I have to split apart the lining and the front of the pocket, just so I don't sew through the entire pocket and have a line of stitching running through the front of it.
Oh, what went wrong now? Come on. Oh, bobbin.
This is the bobbin. The bobbin is put in the bottom of the machine to form the stitches. You have to keep the bobbin wound if you want to keep on making stitches. So now we can get back to actually making some stitches. Next up, I just do a short stitch around the edge to make sure the edges stay together.
Oh, definitely messed up something there, but not like you're gonna see it, so it doesn't matter.
While I was sewing these two ends together, I also realized that because they were not perfect circles, they ended up buckling in certain spots because they were not sized perfectly to each other. So I had to take them apart and put them back together a couple of times to make sure that there was no slack.
So it's buckling right there. You can see it's different from over here, obviously. It's alright. Definitely could fit a bit better, but who cares? It'll go together just fine.
The penultimate step before attaching the ends of the duffel bag is to attach the straps, which I have to mark down with chalk. Sadly, this part is very boring. Cue the music! If you made it this far, I just want to say thank you. I know it can't be too exciting to watch a random kid sew, but I'm glad that you're here. But there's more time to be sappy later. Check out this.
Dang it. Don't swear. Gotta get better with that.
Well, that wasn't supposed to happen. But the project keeps on going. Just gotta replace the needle with what I was using before. As seen here is a 14 needle, which is most commonly used for thicker materials and such.
Focus. Perfect.
As you can see by the abundance of footage of this, it took a while. But now we are finally done with that. I got worried that the edges were going to unravel and just be a bit too unstable for a duffel bag, so I decided to serge the edges. Serging is where 4 spools of thread are woven around an edge to make sure that the fabric itself does not unravel. Once again, this next part is pretty simple. We're just laying out the zipper so we can make the duffel bag open and close. You have to lay the zipper face down when you sew it originally, so whenever you fold it over, you don't see the edge of it. To stitch the zipper as close as possible, we have to use something called the zipper foot. The only thing we need to change about the machine is just move the needle over to the left or the right.
Forgot to hit record for sewing this, but this is what you end up with. Make sure that it...
Time for the other side. Up next is to sew in the lining. All I'm doing here is just going back over the top stitching next to the zipper and then just hitting the lining on the bottom. Next up, we're going to actually make it look like a duffel bag. Here you can see that I've put on the ends to the centerpiece that has been turned inside out. Although after I pinned it up, I remembered that I forgot these tabs here. So let's make those real quick. Don't ask me why I decided to make this so long. It really only needed to be like a quarter of this length. Alrighty, next step is pretty simple. Let's get this thing together.
Okay, here we go.
Here I was cranking the machine by hand and pushing the fabric through pretty hard. I was worried that the needle was going to break over the swell from that little strap loop that I put in there. Finally, we're done. It took 40 minutes of your life, but we're finally here. I say for a first attempt at a duffel bag, it went pretty well. You can see my disappointment and my, well, I don't know what you would call that, looking at the bag. But, all in all, I think it turned out alright. Some edges of the bag were not sewn completely and all the way through, so I didn't go far in enough, so I'll have to go back and fix those. As well as some buckling around the edges, but I don't really care enough to do that. That would involve reshaping the sides and having to remake some stuff, and I'm just going to call it a feature. So a couple quick fixes on the machine, and we'll be back. Now we're finally onto the finishing steps. Stuff that's not really required, but it makes it nice. Here I am cutting away the bulk at the edges. Time for one final step. Some bias tape around the edges. Bias tape is pretty simple. Just put it around the edge and sew on top of it. I'm still working out the kinks in my camera setups, so I'll try not to have it keep on focusing on my hand next time. but I'm going to do one last step to really personalize this experience. All it requires is the embroidery part of my machine. And everyone enjoys a little bit of personalization, so I decided I would embroider my friend's name on here. The only downside of the embroidery machine is that it requires you to hold the pedal down the entire time. For something that'll take nearly 15 minutes, I'm not going to be doing that. I have been sitting down for a really long time, so while this goes, I'm going to get up and move around a little bit. Looks like it's done. And now it's time for the grand reveal. Oh, that's right, baby. After all this time of waiting, we finally got it. And here it is in action, being used for rock climbing. That's it, right there.